Lord a new song, for he has done marvelous things. His right hand and his holy arm have worked salvation for him. The Lord has made his salvation known and revealed his righteousness to the nations. He's remembered his love and his faithfulness to Israel. All the ends of the earth have seen the salvation of our God.
Would you pray with me? Father in heaven, I would ask that the words of my mouth and the meditations of my heart would be pleasing in your sight, that you would use your word spoken by your servant and anointed by your Spirit to encourage us and to feed our souls. May we choose joy today. I pray that for myself and for my family and for all of us here, for I ask that in Jesus' name, amen. Merry Christmas. Joy to the world, the Lord has come. Let earth receive her King. Let every heart prepare him room, and heaven and nature sing. Heaven and nature sing. Let heaven and nature sing. You may not realize it, but those words were written over 300 years ago by a British hymn writer named Isaac Watts. It was 130 years after Isaac Watts first published his collection of hymns from the Psalms that a composer named Lowell Mason took the words of Joy to the World and combined them with an arrangement by George Friedrich Handel and created what we have as the most widely published Christmas hymn in the English language, Joy to the World. It is a song that has been sung now for over 300 years and sung as we sing it for almost 175 years. It is a song that is based on, its source code comes from Psalm 98. Psalm 98 is one of the 61 Psalms of the 150 Psalms in the Bible that has no description of who wrote it or when it was written. There are 89 Psalms that have titles and superscriptions and names of the authors. For example, King David is credited with having written 73 Psalms. The Asaph, the choir director who worked with David, is credited with writing 12. The sons of Korah wrote 11. Solomon is credited with writing 2. A man named Haney and his brother Nathan the Ezrahite are credited with writing 1 each, and even Solomon is credited with writing 2, and Moses is credited with writing 1. But Psalm 98 has no particular author. It also has no instruction on how the psalm is to be referenced or the context of when it was written. It was possible that it is as old as 2,500 years before the time of Christ, or perhaps just a few hundred years. Whatever the timing, it's at least 3,000 years old. And while we don't know when it was written or who wrote it or why it was written, we know what it calls us to do. Psalm 98 gives us an imperative. It throws down the gauntlet and tells us to sing. It is not a suggestion. It is not an invitation. It is a command. It is an imperative that we are to sing to the Lord a new song. Why is that? Why do we sing? I've spent some time thinking about it. Why do we come together to sing in church. I mean, you may sing in a bar, but that's generally not advisable. You may go to a concert where the songs are familiar and you may sing there. You may sing in some other context, sing in the shower. But did you ever think how just strange it is that we come together, normal average people, most of whom who can't carry a tune in a bucket, come together and we sing on Sunday mornings? Well, there is a lot of evidence that suggests that it's one of the healthiest things that we do. There's neuroscience, solid neuroscience, that tells us that when we sing, and not only when we sing, but when we hear other people sing, it creates a chemical in our brains called oxytocin. Oxytocin is often referred to as the love hormone. Oxytocin is what is produced when you are physically intimate with another person. When a person you love or care about physically touches you, it triggers the production of oxytocin. And what neuroscientists have found out is that when you are singing, or when you are hearing someone else sing and you are absorbing what's going on, the music in your environment, your brain starts to produce oxytocin. It's almost like it's an invisible hug or an embrace. And there's not just neurological evidence, there's also psychological evidence. Psychologists tell us that what music does is music allows us to classify how we feel when our words are inadequate to describe how we're feeling. We know that music can make us feel alive, or it can make us feel sad, or it can make us feel excited. It's because music has the psychological ability to provide for us an experience that words are inadequate to do alone. There's also sociological evidence that says that what happens when we are connecting with people is we have an exchange of neurons, mirror neurons between each other. When we are singing together, our brains are actually synchronizing with one another. There's a neuroscientist from Harvard University. His name is Leonid Perlovsky. And he did a number of extensive tests on the neurobiology and the psychology of music. And Perlovsky says this: music helps us navigate a world rife with contradictions. Like the old adage says, where words fail, music speaks. While language splits the world into details, distinct pieces, music unifies the world into a whole. Our psyche requires both. Another Harvard neuroscientist named Daniel Levitin cites over 400 psychological studies that indicate that music has more effect on people's anxiety and cortisol levels than prescription drugs. We sing because it allows us to connect with that intangible part of us. We sing, but not just without reason. The psalmist in Psalm 98 gives us a purpose for singing. He says, sing to the Lord. The Lord there, the word for the Lord there is the word Yahweh. It is the most intimate name of a personal God. It is the God of the people of Israel. It is the God who is the great I am. It is the creator and sustainer of the universe. It is the God who is known by us and who knows us. We sing to the Lord. And there in Psalm 98, it interestingly outlines for us why it is that we sing to the Lord. In Psalm 98, verse 1, it says, sing to the Lord a new song, for he has done marvelous things. His right hand and his holy arm have worked salvation for him. The Lord has made his salvation known and revealed his righteousness to the nations. He has remembered his love and his faithfulness to Israel, and all the ends of the earth have seen the salvation of our God. Why do we sing to Yahweh? He says it 3 times, repeats it in each verse. We sing because of the salvation that he has worked. We sing because he has made his salvation known. We sing because of that salvation that we can receive. Now, what's interesting is the word for salvation there is the word yashar. It is one of the most repeated words in the entire Hebrew Bible. It appears 335 times. It's a word that has a Semitic etymology that goes all the way back to the Akkadians and the Babylonians. It appears in the Arabic language. Yasar, at its root meaning, etymologically, meant to make a path or to clear a way or to widen a road. It came to mean in the time of Moses to deliver. The word for deliverer is the word Yeshua. It is the name Joshua. It is also the name Jesus. In Psalm 98, in the first 3 verses, we sing to the Lord, who is our deliverer, who is our Savior, who makes the way for us to enter into, to escape from, and to move into a relationship with him. It says, sing to the Lord a new song. You see, out of that deliverance, we are made new. We are given a second chance. If there is a theme that is embedded in the celebration of the birth of Christ, it is the theme of a new beginning, of a fresh start, of a second chance. What we celebrate in this Christmas season, what we sing about in this Christmas season, is we sing to the Lord a new song, a song of fresh starts and second chances and new beginnings. We experience this in our life in a lot of ways. I remember the first time that I experienced a second chance, and it really mattered to me. I was 13 years old. I was in the Boy Scouts, and as a young scout, there was an organization in the Boy Scouts called the Order of the Arrow. If you are in scouting, you may be familiar with it. It's a camping society. It's sort of like a fraternity of scouts who enjoy camping and in the wilderness. And to join the Order of the Arrow in the region that I was in scouting, you had to go through an initiation process. Once you were nominated to join the Order of the Arrow, you would have to go and undergo an initiation. And for us, it was in the spring, before the summer camp season, we would go, all of the initiates, a couple dozen of us, to our camp, our scout camp, which was on the Delaware River. It was called Camp Baquara. And we would go there and we would de-winterize the camp and do repairs around the camp just before the summer season. But when we went to do this initiation, there were a number of very specific rules. The first rule was you had to spend from the time you arrived on Friday to the time of the initiation ceremony on Sunday in silence. You could not speak. And what you had to do was you had to fashion an arrow out in the woods. You had to go out and find a branch and carve an arrow, and you had to wear that arrow around your neck the entire weekend. And should you speak when you were not allowed during that time of silence, any of the senior leaders, any of the scoutmasters could put a notch in your arrow. And if your arrow did not survive the weekend, you were not allowed to enter into the Order of the Arrow. Another part of the initiation was we were sent out blindfolded, taken blindfolded into the woods Friday evening and dropped off by ourselves to where we were supposed to build a campfire and sleep out under the stars overnight, keeping the fire going all night long, which was no problem for me because I was somewhat of a pyromaniac. But I went out that Friday night, they blindfolded me, and we went hiked through the woods for the better part of an hour. And then the scoutmaster dropped me off and said, I'll see you in the morning. Make sure you fashion your arrow. So I built a fire, and then I went looking for a stick, and I have to tell you, I made a magnificent arrow. I mean, it was straight and it was beautiful, and I had shaved it down, and I was very proud of my arrow. And then I took a piece of twine and I tied it around my neck, and the next morning I put out the fire, broke my camp, cleaned up the campsite, and went back down into the mess hall where all of the initiates were. And when I walked in, I realized I had made a terrible miscalculation, because all of these other scouts were in on the joke, you see. Because their arrows were like 2x4s or tree trunks. They were large. You would have to take a chainsaw to cut through their arrows. And mine was pencil thin, just one drag of a sharp blade, and my arrow would have been split in two. And I knew that the next 24 hours were going to be torture because I had to be absolutely silent. Yeah, But I did it. I made it all the way through Saturday, and we had chores, and we were, raking leaves and digging ditches and cleaning up the camp. And near the end of the day, just before the meal, I was out with a couple of scouts, and we were building a retaining wall of railroad ties around a campsite. And as we were placing the railroad ties in the wall that was going to be the retaining wall, the other scout lost his grip, and the railroad tie fell and smashed into my hand. You ever have a moment where time kind of goes into slow motion? And you observe some things out of the context of the reality of how they're moving? In that moment, as the railroad tie was smashing through my fingers, I remember looking up over the shoulder of the other scout and seeing the scoutmaster. And the scoutmaster had a beautiful ivory-handled Bowie knife. And just as the railroad tie fell and smashed my hand, it was as if in slow motion he reached and withdrew the Bowie knife, and I could see the glint on the edge, the sharpness, the razor fine point on the edge of his Bowie knife. And so as the pain shot up my arm and I pulled my hand free, I turned and I walked away, grimacing in pain, but not uttering a word, not a sound. And as I stood there trying to see if I still had all of my fingers and they were starting to be bruised, the scoutmaster came up and he placed his hand on my shoulder. And he said, "Are you okay, Scout?" And I turned to him and said, "Yes, I'm fine." At that moment, I looked again at the Bowie knife, and I knew my adventure in the Order of the Arrow was coming to an end. But you know what he did? He gave me a second chance. He gave me a fresh start, and he simply dragged his Bowie knife across my arrow, barely making a mark. It was the first time that I recognized that we can have fresh starts and second chances and new beginnings. And that is at the core of the message of why we sing. We sing to the Lord a new song. We celebrate the idea that we can have a second chance. We can have a fresh start. And the message of Christmas, at the core of it, is the invitation to sing to the Lord that new song. That this is a season where we can begin again. You see, we don't just sing. It's not a performance that we do. It's not something that we engage in for our personal satisfaction. We sing because we're connecting with that promise. See, I'm not much of a singer, unfortunately, to my mother's chagrin. You see, my mother was an elementary school music teacher. And so my sister and I were raised with the expectation that we would have some musical ability. By the time I was 6 years old, I was told that I would have to take piano lessons, which lasted about a month, because I had absolutely no aptitude or patience or tolerance for learning the piano. But my parents said, "We'll make a deal with you. If you don't want to learn the piano, you have to pick another instrument." And it was the 1960s. So I said, "I want to play rock and roll guitar." So I got a guitar and I started taking lessons. And for the next 6 years, I would take lessons for a couple months and quit. I would take lessons a year later for a couple months and quit. I had absolutely no musical ability whatsoever. But when I was in 8th grade, I decided I wanted to be in the band. So I said, it has to be the easiest instrument to play? The trumpet. It only has 3 little knobs on it. How hard can a trumpet be? So I took trumpet lessons for the better part of the year. And then, my freshman year in high school, I had my one last musical shot. For some reason that I do not understand to this day, I decided to play the French horn. This is an actual photo proof of me in the freshman band with my French horn, and that's about as musical as I got because I couldn't read a note. I have no idea how I maneuvered through a year of freshman band playing the French horn. I just played notes that came out. You see, when the psalmist invites us to sing, challenges us to sing, throws down the gauntlet and says we are to sing, it is so that we connect with the music of our soul, the music of our soul that longs for a second chance, for a fresh start, for a new beginning. We sing to the Lord a new song. This is the nature of the celebration of Christmas. This is what the Christmas season is about. It's about celebrating the incarnation, which was a new beginning, a new start, a reminder that all we have to do is sing to the Lord a new song, and we can begin again. Isaac Watts, as he was putting the Psalms to music, as he was writing the poetry of the Psalms, came to Psalm 98. And he began by saying, "Joy to the world, the Lord has come. Let earth receive her King. Let every heart prepare him room, and heaven and nature sing." And heaven and nature sing. Let heaven and nature sing. Joy to the world. Merry Christmas.